In our last video, we talked about national level economic policies, right? About fiscal and monetary policy. In this one, we're going to talk about the theory of comparative advantage, which is the central core concept in international economics. And to be clear, now I'm switching gears. We're going to pull these threads together later on, but for now, you're not supposed to be able to see sort of the connections between fiscal and monetary policy on the one hand and comparative advantage on the other. But comparative advantage is one of these concepts that it's not intuitive, but once you look at it and understand a little bit of the logic behind it, it reveals a great deal. And in my mind, of the concepts we're going to talk about in this course, this is one of the 10 most important, if not one of the 5 most important. And again, you'd come across it in any macroeconomics class or any international trade class. So the idea is pretty simple. Why do countries trade? Right? That's the question that it answers. Why do countries trade? And it gets to this question. The theory of comparative advantage, which was devised by an English economist named David Ricardo, basically explained it in terms of differential productivity. So let's just start with this simple example, which comes straight out of the textbook. Right? 2 countries here, China and the United States, and 2 goods, right? Wheat and textiles, and really the only input into both of them is labor. So a vastly simplified model in order to make a point. Now, in this view of things, right, China is better at making wheat, right? They can make a 300 bushels of wheat per day of labor, whereas we lazy Americans can only make 100. Interestingly enough, in this model, and of course I just made this stuff up, it's complete abstraction, Chinese labor is also more productive at textiles, right? So if they're better at both things, why would they trade, right? That's the real question that Ricardo wanted to get at and that we want to understand, because we see this, right? Rich countries with very high labor productivity, which is based mostly on technology and education, trade all the time with poorer, less productive economies. Why is that? Well, here's the answer. The key thing that Ricardo pointed out, and the key thing that's not intuitive, but you got to understand about this model, is the difference between the internal prices, right? So if someone in China wants to have more textiles, right, they essentially have to give up 1 bushel of wheat to get another yard of textiles, because the relationship between productivity here and here is 1 to 4. Or if they want to give up textiles to get wheat, right, they can do the opposite. In the United States, you have a different ratio. You have 1 to 2, right? And it's the difference between the 1 to 4 in China and the 1 to 2 in the United States that creates the basis for trade. If I tweaked these numbers a little bit, right? If I change this number from 1,200 to 600, then even though China was most productive at each of them, the ratio would be 1 to 2, and this would be 1 to 2, and there would be no basis for trade, right? That doesn't happen too often. It's not too often exactly the same. Right? So this is the big point, right? Is if the U.S. and China trade at 1 to 3, both actors are getting a better price by trading than they could get internally, right? 1 to 3 is better for the Chinese because it's better than 1 to 4, right? And for the United States, it's better for them because that's better than 1 to 3. That is to say, the United States can get more textiles by trading at 1 to 3. China can get more wheat by trading at 4 to 1. So let's just look at the numbers, right? But the big point is this. They both save money. So this also comes straight out of the textbook. And the idea is, right, the United States, this doesn't have to be complete, but again, the numbers are particular because of the way I did the model to keep the math easy. But the United States basically says, just to go back, right, let me go back a step. Oops, wrong way. The United States can make 100 bushels of wheat for every 200 yards of textiles. China can make 100 bushels of wheat for every 400 yards of textiles. So comparatively speaking, the United States is more efficient at wheat, and China in this model is more efficient at textiles. And so the United States is going to specialize in wheat, China is going to specialize in textiles, and they trade at this 1 to 3 price, which goes in between. And that's what you see in this set of tables. And the big point is this, that overall production goes up, right? In the original model, with no trade, we had 4,000 bushels of wheat being produced total and 14,000 textiles. When you specialize and then trade, the total production of wheat can stay at 4,000 bushels, but because it's now being produced more efficiently by more of it being done in the United States, China can push some of its labor into textiles, which it's really good at, and now with the same amount of wheat, you've increased your textile production overall by 2,000 yards per day. And this really is the magic, is that without any increase in inputs, right? We haven't added any labor, we haven't added any money, we haven't added any raw materials, without any increase in inputs, wealth overall increases, right? Overall wealth went from 4,000 plus 12,000 to 4,000 plus 16,000, right? So that's what liberal free trade theorists would call a miracle, right? All you have to do is trade. That's the economic point. The political point is that international trade politics is not a zero-sum game. And so liberal international relations theorists are going to take this economics and say, this makes a really important point, because realism says kind of that power is a zero-sum game. Whatever is good for one country is bad for another. And what this shows us is that it's not true, right? Both countries can get better off at the same time, and therefore countries should cooperate more. And liberals are going to say, we've proven it mathematically.